Thank you for joining us for another Beam conversation. Today, we're joined by General Manager of Commercial Growth, Nerique, and Beam's Growth and Partnership Manager, Josie. Thank you for joining us both. We'll start, so for many Beam listeners and people who've been involved in the payroll world for a while, they may or may not know that Beam and Art Group are actually part of the same world, right? What's the history and story of Beam and how did we get to this point? Josie?
8 years ago, paying super was really complicated. There's a story actually by our founder, Matt Gilroy, that tells that they used to weigh the actual contributions that were coming in. And they thought about there has to be a better way to do this because they had challenges on, getting things in. The data was correct. Is it correct? Is everything there? So they decided to look at a tech solution. So Beam has become that technology clearinghouse that makes it simple for everyone to pay super.
And what's the relationship between Beam and Art? Beam is wholly owned by Australian Retirement Trust, right?
Yeah, but absolutely agnostic to Art. So with Beam technology, you can pay any superannuation company. We are totally operate, different to Art, but we are, as we say, powered by Art, in that we've got the backing of one of the biggest Australian superannuation companies, but definitely agnostic for the benefit of Australians to get better outcomes in their retirement is really what we're focused on.
I mean, there's not many big super funds that I know of that have an in-house clearinghouse that I'm aware of. What's the steps that we take, I guess, to support employers with this tool? I mean, starting with you, Nerique, there's so much that Australian Retirement Trust does in the superannuation world, but when it comes to employers, what do we have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So Art is one of the largest funds in Australia. We look after 2.4 million members and 190,000 employers. So we have a very large customer base, which means that we have a range of services for those employers. So from our really big Australian top 200 companies, we have a dedicated relationship management model, down to our really small, single sole ownership or small and medium enterprises. We service them with, digital tools, newsletters and education to help them around what they need to do to pay super for their employees.
For the, general employer who maybe doesn't know that much about superannuation and about clearinghouse, where does the relationship sit between Beam and Art and clearinghouse? So if I'm an employer, I'm a small business owner, and I'm just looking to pay, at what point am I talking to Art and what point am I talking to Beam in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So think about the super fund as being always on, right? We are there for you throughout the entire year, helping you with your queries on your employees' accounts, supporting you with newsletters, things around what's happening in the industry, what do you need to know, supporting you with things like insurance claims and all of that. But really, Beam comes in the moment that you are ready to pay your super. And that's when Beam takes over. So Beam is there to help facilitate and make it really easy for you to pay your super obligations, not just to Art, but to all other funds. We know employers pay to a range of funds. And we want to make that really simple by doing it in one single place and with a really simple process. So that's when Beam takes over.
Yeah, and I think we've been working with the payrolls within the Australian market to really integrate into that, to be able to make it so simple. Because really, you're right, Duncan and Nerique talks about it, that superannuation is so big. It is becoming now very focused. Everyone's interested. So an employer, how do they go about it? Because do they go out and use a portal? People using the ATO clearinghouse, that is now closed. So there is no way for those people who used to use the ATO clearinghouse now use Beam through our integrated payrolls that have integrated with us. And the really great thing about that as well is from a payroll perspective, you know who the employee is, you know where they're going to put their superannuation. And again, we're agnostic, so they can pay anytime, to any super fund.
And then Art will receive the funds just like any other super fund. So it goes through the clearinghouse, and then we receive the money in the Art bank account. And that's then when Art takes over again, and we then allocate those monies and invest that money as soon as possible.
And also, employers, we're really understanding through talking to our payrolls what the issues are with employers, right? They've got a lot on. They're not just talking about superannuation. It is a minute part of their business. They've got to do other things with their business, to grow their business, to get more money, to make sure their employees are happy. So, for Beam to make it simple for them to pay in just one click is really, and then it goes, the benefit for the employer is that they're helping the employees reach better retirement outcomes. And that is really what Beam is all about.
The other thing I might just add is that through Art Scale, we have access to, thought leadership and access to the best in the industry around what is going to influence super in the best way for members. And so we, with Payday Super coming, we've been engaging with the ATO, we've been engaging with industry bodies around what do we think is the best way for these things to be implemented. So those employers using Beam and having access to Beam means that they also have this bigger intelligence behind Beam that we can then also ensure the services and the functionality that we're putting into Beam, that it's compliant, but also that we are trying to introduce the best ideas in the industry into our solutions.
We've previously had payrolls on the couch talking to us about this, and we kind of use this analogy of like the ecosystem, the employer ecosystem, and all of the tools that are at their disposal to make payroll work as a function. And for them, I guess superannuation is such a minute part of that function. And for us, it's everything. It's really important to everyone in the building. What's the relationship then between Beam and Art in that ecosystem for the end result of making payroll simpler for people? What's the common goal that Beam and Art share in this process and in this ecosystem?
So the common goal really is just to get super paid as quickly as possible and into accounts as quickly as possible, trying to take the burden out of the day-to-day operations of employers, and for us to do the heavy lifting around super. An employer just wants to pay super in a really simple way, and we want to make sure that we safeguard that money and invest it for the future.
And working with payrolls, it's really important that the ecosystem of employers, bookkeepers, tax agents, and people that are working together with the payroll to make payments for superannuation, we all want to understand what is needed. We know that there is a lot of money out there that isn't being allocated to hardworking Australians that should be getting their superannuation. It is their money and it's being lost. So in a way that Payday Super and the fact that we are focusing on superannuation is really important, because we don't want any Australian left behind at the time that they want to retire. And I think that's where payrolls and bookkeepers and accountants, as much as this is just a little piece of information or a little bit of work that they have to do, it is actually the biggest impact into someone retiring with really a lot of money or good amount of money to continue their life.
It's kind of like Art maintaining the system and maintaining the superannuation body as a whole.
And we've got technology behind it.
Yeah, and Beam is just making sure that the money gets to where it needs to go as quickly and promptly as possible. So what is the benefit for members and employers between this relationship? What is something that they can look at and go, that's a tangible benefit for this relationship?
So I think from a Beam perspective, we're really lucky that we lean into education, and it's not necessarily, again, art, it is industry stuff. So we tap into a lot of the stuff that Art is doing with industry bodies, through the government bodies, through, even Treasury and the department, that we can take away from that. But also working with our payrolls, and we've got great information on our website. We've got a marketplace for employers that they can go to. We've got all of that. We've got information on Payday Super. So it's a one-stop shop where we're really focused on the better outcomes and making it easier. So Beam being this technology, it's not something big and heavy to lift. It's just really simple and easy to use. And I think that's something that both Art and Beam have worked closely together from an educational perspective and industry information.
Yeah, absolutely. So Art is really focused on educating Australians about super. And so we offer a range of tools for the everyday Australian, and you don't have to be an Art member to access these tools. Things like our learning hub, our education seminars, our webinars, our newsletters that we issue to our employers. All of that content and insight is repackaged for our Beam payrolls as well. So what that means is that we're leveraging the insights and we're leveraging all this knowledge that sits inside Art, and also giving that to the Beam payrolls, which means that we can run webinars and sessions conversations with the Beam payroll partners, and they can invite their employers and employees to access that information as well. So that just means that we are trying to educate and uplift the knowledge about super industry across the industry, from the top end of the largest corporates in Australia all the way down to the fish and chip shop around the corner. That's really our sole purpose, is to ensure everyone understands super and maximises it to its full potential.
Now, we are in the Super Insider studio, so it would be remiss of me to not ask you some superannuation questions while we're here. Thank you, Anne and Ruth, for letting us use your studio. In your time as General for Commercial Growth, what challenges do you see employers facing and dealing with, and what are we doing to help them?
So what we're seeing from employers and in the conversations that we are having with employers at the moment is that we are trying to understand whether they still consider super as a key part of their employee value proposition, given that it is, with payday super coming and having to pay super with wages, it's really put the spotlight back onto super. And that it is starting, for them to think about, am I maximizing that benefit for my employees? Are my employees informed? Are they financially literate? Can they understand what they can do with their super? So those questions are coming up. Also, they're trying to understand, do I have the right design in my super fund? Is the insurance appropriate for my employees in the industry that we're working in? And do they have the tools available that they can also maximize their super? So that's certainly a theme at the moment. I think from an employer perspective, they are looking at how do they face into payday super in the current economic climate. Particularly small businesses are trying to think, how are they going to come up with the cash flow to pay super with wages? And so how can they do that really simply? So they're leaning on their service providers to give them that information. And I think it's really just highlighted that this is something that's going to be a key employee benefit moving forward. Your employees are going to be more aware of this benefit because they will understand that it's hitting the super fund regularly. So hopefully it raises the awareness of super and also makes people question, am I in the right super fund? Do I have the right insurance? Am I in the right investment option? And am I on track for retirement?
And Josie, it's your time to bring a little bit of payroll into the Super Insider room. Any quick takeaways you'd give an employer to start thinking about their payroll and about their software?
So what I would say with the employers is to look at your payroll, making sure that your superannuation ability to pay is within the legislated days. Make sure the tech's ready. If you were using any other, the ATO clearinghouse, have a look at, you can go onto the Beam Hub marketplace and look at for payrolls that have Beam integrated. I think it's important to make sure that you've got all your data, has everything been updated in their payrolls and the right information. The other big thing that there is a big discussion around is around working capital, because we're moving from having, paying super quarterly, and I know a lot of businesses out there are really struggling in the current climate of trying to, with inflation and everything happening in Australia at the moment, work out your working capital. How are you going to pay now every 2 weeks if you're paying your employees' wages at that time? So talk to your payrolls. They've really got a lot of handle on this. We've been talking to a lot of our payrolls. They're really passionate. We've got lots of webinars, newsletters, again, as ART does. Really, the biggest thing that employers can do to be ready is be aware, stay up to date, get on the ATO website, get onto your superannuation, ART website, get onto Beam. We've got everything. So keep yourself up to date with all the changes, what's happening, and there's a lot of data and information out there for everybody.